Here are 8 stories of UFO and alien encounters. Let's begin. Number 8. Clayton and Donna Lee. A Texas-based husband and wife claim to have been abducted by aliens multiple times, including once where a fetus was stolen from Donna by the alien trespassers. Clayton claims that he was a child visiting a park the very first time he was abducted, and that he feels the aliens might be studying him throughout his life. "I remember just floating up higher," Donna Lee recounted about her experience, "and all that was around me were stars and blackness, and then I passed out." The couple have had their memories of this event awakened by a local psychologist, who ironically doesn't actually believe in aliens herself. They both have drawn sketches of the aliens and appeared on multiple media outlets to talk about their story, including the one on the O'Reilly Factor. O'Reilly asks, "Alright, and you were abducted multiple amounts of times?" Lee says, yes. O'Reilly, "Did you ever talk to the abductees? I mean, did they tell you where they were from or anything?" Lee, "No, that I don't have any remembering of at all." Having the conversation? No. O'Reilly, "So they just swept you away from somewhere? Where'd they put you?" Lee, "Different places, different times. I've had memories of being on what I consider the ship, because I know it was someplace other than any place I've ever visited before." O'Reilly, "So, were you in some kind of vehicle?" Lee, "Yes, it was a vehicle. A room. It was very cold. Metal. A lot of metal." O'Reilly, Did you see the aliens?" Lee, "Yes." O'Reilly, "What do they look like?" Lee, "What I saw on that particular visit, they were tall, slender, and blonde. They looked human, but not quite human." O'Reilly, "Alright." Lee, "They didn't really use their voices to talk." The couple say they remain worried about being abducted, almost daily, but they want to live their lives, regardless. Number 7. The Gunda Maki alien abduction. In a chilling story that 3 different people were involved in, a 22-year-old named Amy was abducted right out of her window in a lounge room by some sort of flying craft. Amy's husband, Keith, had already gone to bed, while her friend Petra stayed up to read in another room. Petra was abruptly disrupted by a blinding light coming from the lounge room, and the sound of shattering glass. The rectangular beam of light was shining into the room, and according to Petra, she saw Amy being pulled out of the window by the light, still apparently asleep. Keith then woke up, and both he and Petra searched the house and surrounding area for Amy, who was nowhere to be found. Keith eventually called the police. Amy turned up miles away with strange marks on her inner thigh and bizarrely extensive body hair growth. Number 6. Russian millionaire politician taken by aliens? Kherson, the former president of the only Buddhist politician state, avidly claims that he was once kidnapped by creatures not of this world. He says they abducted him off his apartment balcony and took them into their spaceship. Yeah, I was taken from my apartment in Moscow to this spaceship, and we went to some star. After that, I asked, "Please bring me back," because the next day I should be back to my home. They said, "Oh no, you have time. Don't worry, Kherson, you have time." When pressed for details of the aliens themselves, Kursan says, "They are people, just like us. They have the same mind, the same vision." I talked with them. I understand that we are not alone in the whole world. We are not unique. The ship was absolutely enormous. One of its chambers was the size of a large football field. We landed on one of the planets, and we picked up some piece of equipment. They told me everything in detail. Allegedly, while Kursan was abducted, his staff came looking for him and was unable to locate him until he inexplicably appeared in his suite hours later. Number 5. The Robert Taylor Incident. Robert Taylor was a forestry worker in Livingston, Scotland. He was heading to work in the woods in 1979 when he turned a corner and saw a UFO parked in a field. His dog was panicky, running around and barking. Taylor tried to calm him down but found that his voice was gone. He was very weak, and when he tried to stand, he couldn't. He crawled for a time until he was able to stand again. He finally made it back to his pickup truck and tried to radio his work headquarters via his two-way, but he still could not speak. Attempting to drive his truck back home, he got stuck in the mud. So he started a long walk about a mile back to his house. He arrived at 11:45 a.m. His wife phoned the police once he got home, remarking that he looked terrible. The police began an investigation, having no real explanation for the bizarre tracks left at the scene of the UFO. No aircraft, civilian or military, was scheduled to be in the area according to comprehensive flight logs. Number 4. Forestry worker goes MIA for 5 days. Where was he? Travis Walton was one of the 7 men working in a forestry team in Snowflake, Arizona. When heading home from work one night, the team spied a blinding bright light. Thinking it was a crashed plane, they drove over to the craft. What they saw, however, did not look like any plane. Walton jumped out of the truck to get a closer look at the craft. Suddenly, a bright light shot from the UFO and sent Walton floating into the UFO. The remaining 6 crew members panicked and drove away from the scene to get help. About 7:30 p.m., one of the crew members called the police. Deputy Sheriff Chuck Elson answered the telephone. The crew member initially reported only that one of the logging crew was missing. Ellison then met the crew at a shopping center. They related the tale to him, all the men distraught and 2 of them in tears. And though he was somewhat skeptical of the fantastic account, Ellison would later reflect that if they were acting, they were awfully good at it. After an initial scan of the area showed no evidence of a UFO, the police began to suspect the men were using the story to cover up the fact that they simply murdered Walton. However, over the next few days, all 6 loggers were subjected to intense interrogations and polygraphs, and their story seemed to hold up. That's when Walton suddenly reappeared. Thinking he had only been gone for a few hours, Walton retold parts of the story he could. He said he was interrogated by 3 creatures with bald heads and huge eyes. He apparently encountered many different creatures on the craft, who performed experiments on him. Many people were skeptical of the story, but Walton and all the other loggers maintained their stories. Number 3. The Manhattan Abduction. Linda Napolitano, originally Linda Cortell, triggered one of the most well-documented UFO abduction cases when she claimed to have been kidnapped out of the window of her Manhattan apartment building by a flying saucer. Linda describes her time with the aliens. So I'm standing up on nothing, and they take me all the way up, way above the building. Oh, I hope I don't fall. The UFO opens almost like a clam, and then I'm inside. I see benches similar to like regular benches, and they're bringing me down a hallway. Doors open like sliding doors. Inside are all these lights and buttons and a big long table. I don't want to get up on that table. They get me up on the table anyway. They start saying things to me and I'm yelling. I can still yell. One of them says something that sounds like, "No bega." I think they were trying to tell me to be quiet because he put his hand over my mouth. Her abduction story has been corroborated by 2 United Nations bodyguards, who claim to have seen the exact scene that Linda describes. There was an oval-shaped object hovering over the top of the apartment building 2 or 3 blocks up from where we sat. We didn't know where it came from. It happened too fast. Its light turned from a bright reddish orange to a whitish blue coming out of the bottom. Green lights rotated around the edge of the saucer. A little girl or woman wearing a white gown sailed out of the window in a fetal position, and then stood in mid-air in the beam. I could see 3 of the ugliest creatures I ever saw. I don't know what they were, but they definitely weren't human. Their heads were out of proportion, very large heads with no hair. Those buggers were escorting her into the craft. My partner screamed, "We have got to get them!" We tried to get out of the car, but we couldn't. After the woman was escorted in, the oval turned reddish orange again, and whisked off. Years later, in 2001, a photo was taken at Linda's apartment. The aliens might have been visiting to check up on her. Both bodyguards would later go on to suffer severe psychological damage after seeing what they did that night. Linda still maintains her story to this day. Number 2. Dr. Hopkins and the Men in Black. In 1978, a man named Dr. Hopkins had been studying a UFO case when he received a mysterious phone call from a man who claimed to represent a UFO organization, which later proved to be false. When Hopkins agreed to talk, the man was at the door immediately. The man was completely bald, even his eyebrows. And it seemed like he didn't actually have lips, but he tried to hide it by wearing red lipstick. He spoke in a monotone voice and made a coin disappear. Then he told the doctor to cease all research and destroy his evidence. The man behaved as if he was running out of power near the end of the encounter, and vanished into a light outside. Hopkins had another encounter with the same man, and a similarly odd woman accompanied him this time. The man made sexually inappropriate comments in addition to behaving in the same strange robotic manner, and disappearing mysteriously. Number 1. 2 children from Arizona encounter alien. In 2009, 2 children from the state of Arizona were home alone one night. They went through their usually weekend routine. Their mother was out for the night, and the kids were just playing video games. As it got later, they got ready for bed, brushed their teeth, and changed into their pajamas. The older child was 9 years old, and the younger child was 7. They shared a room, and their window looked out over a vacant lot behind their house. As they started to get into their beds, the older child said to the younger, "Hey, look how bright the moon is. It's lighting up the entire field." The younger one came to look, and as he did, they both saw a tall humanoid figure. It looked as if it wasn't wearing any clothes, and its skin was a pale grayish color. The figure stopped right in the middle of the field, and it stared right at them. They both ducked down. The older child decided to veer out the window just a bit, but the being was now closer to the window and it stared back at her with pitch black eyes. She stumbled backwards and the boy said, "What?" and looked out the window, just in time to see the alien or being walk out of the field. They were terrified and shut their blinds and called their mother to tell her about the experience. The children were so scared from this encounter. The older child, the little girl, said that she had many encounters since this first one, and she hopes that they stop, but as of lately, she still has encounters.